Right, welcome back to the Jack Ward Football Podcast and welcome to another League One roundup. It's Wednesday morning and we are now reflecting on all of the action from last night in Sky Bet League One. I've got a train to catch in less than an hour's time, so we can't mess about any further. 4 selected games for you this morning and then we will go around the grounds. Please make sure you leave a like and subscribe on the road to 5,000 subscribers. The support on the recent episodes has been fantastic. Let me know in the comment section down below how you're feeling after this round of fixtures. I'll be replying and responding to all of those as per usual. Let's get straight into it, beginning with the first game at the Kassam Stadium between Oxford United and Pompey. So it finishes Oxford 1, Portsmouth 1. The XG for the match 1.67 to Pompey's 0.44. If only Oxford had a striker or anybody that could put the ball into the back of the net. Another dominant display when it comes to chance creation, but just no end product. Hard work rate, running, it cannot be faulted, but we're still searching for our first win in 16 games and we're going to need to take more chances than just one header from a corner for that to happen. You can have a little look at the graph in front of you and the XG of 1.67 to 0.44. I think Oxford did again well at limiting the opposition to little moments and chances in the game. You can see the spikes or the lack of spikes for Pompey. No really big dominant spells with huge chances at the end of it. Compare that to Oxford, we've had quite a few. You can see that spell in the second half. We came out of the blocks, I thought, really well after that first sort of 10-15 minutes of allowing Pompey into the match. It was 1-1 of course at half time. We'll come on to the goals in just a second, but when you get those chances, we're just so wasteful. We are absolutely wasteful, and I did a bit of a rant on the episode on Saturday and we spoke about the fact that if we did have somebody that could score a goal, we'd win games of football because we're on top. We are dominating opposition. We're taking games to Bolton on Saturday. We're taking games to Pompey last night. And yes, Portsmouth aren't in brilliant form and they're not playing their most brilliant football under John Mousinho right now. That is fair to say. But we should still win this game. And they've got talent in that squad that we could outplay. And we did for moments until we got into the final third. Let's go down to the stats. Now we'll come back to the shot map because it does feel as though it's deja vu in that department. But look at the state of those numbers there. 21 shots for Oxford and only 4 on target. Oxford had 15 more shots than Pompey, but the two sides had the same number on target. Pompey had 6 total shots and had 4 on target. We had 21 total shots, 4 on target. It's just so wasteful. We are not clinical whatsoever. I don't think the players... It's confidence, isn't it? It does come down to confidence. But at the same time, we come to this shot map here. They are professional footballers, and that is the truth. I know confidence plays a massive part in football, and when you haven't scored, not a penalty or a set play goal in such a long time. I can't even remember the last time we scored it. Maybe it would have been Morecambe 5 games ago. But when you haven't got that confidence in front of goal, and when you haven't got that recent confidence when putting the ball into the back of the net, and that's anybody, not just the strikers, but any player in the penalty area. I was sort of joking to the person I was watching the game with. It's almost as like the players get dizzy. The Oxford attackers get dizzy when they get into the penalty area. It is ridiculous, but you've got to hit the target, I think, as professional footballers. To only have 4 on target from 21 shots is crazy. It is absolutely crazy. It's so similar. I joked earlier about deja vu when looking at that shot map. I mean, look at it. There are shots in and around the penalty area. They're not 21 shots outside the area. A good over half of those efforts are inside. Billy Bowden missed a massive chance in injury time. Donker missed a chance in the first half that, again, he's a young lad, and I think he did really well at pressing, at running. He made a bit of a nuisance of himself, which I think is exactly what we need from somebody who's energetic like Gatling O'Donker, but when it comes to being a striker, he had 2 massive chances in the game, and if he was in an under-18 shirt, I think he probably would have scored it, but when people get into their first team Oxford shirt, the whole finishing ability seems to just completely go out of the window right now. That's how it feels. Let's go to the lineups because I've got some interesting things to say, I think, about some individuals. I think Pompey actually didn't like the press at times. I thought when we gave them that energy and something to think about when it was going to happen quite quick and we were going to charge and press at them in numbers, and I think be quite tactically switched on with the trigger presses, they didn't really like it. I thought Sean Raggett didn't really like the press. I know he's not a ball-playing defender, if you like. He's a bit more of a no-nonsense centre-half, but he didn't like being pressed, and I think we did work that out quite quickly, hence why Gatling O'Donker, I think, started the game, and Tyler Gooderham, who will run for days. That did work, and I think Liam Manning made the right call for starting those players. Matt Macey in goal, I don't think had the best of games, and I think when I come to trigger pressing and actually making it quite difficult for them when going at the players, I think Matt Macey's also included in that for Pompey. His distribution I thought was quite poor. I think he allowed Oxford, I think he went out of play probably about 2 or 3 times, but again, when he did get hold of the ball, it was a little bit shaky. He almost invited a Gatling O'Donkor to press him, and if that goes wrong, it's a horrendous goalkeeping mistake. He did one against Port Vale a couple of weeks ago where he did get pressed and he panicked and just booted it into the middle of the football pitch and they conceded from it. So I would say that defence, we had a game plan, and that was just bring energy, come with energy, and if they make a mistake, then that'll happen. And a couple of times we did press really well. In the second half we pressed, and then Marcus Brown, twist and turns, brilliant pace, a technical player of top quality, Marcus Brown, but once again an attacker getting into the final third, into the penalty area, they get dizzy and they absolutely fire it into the stand. So again, but that does come from coming with a sense of enthusiasm and urgency, and I think we did bring that. I really, really did think we did. Let's touch on the goals and how the games and how the game went when it comes to the big moments. 26 minutes into the match, Marlon Pack, a stunning free kick. He treats them like penalties. Marcus McGuane fouls somebody on the edge of the penalty area, and Marlon Pack steps up, and it's a stunning free kick into the top left corner. And at that point, you're just thinking, we felt we were on top. We felt like we were really competing in the game, and then to concede like that from a dead ball, that sums up our season. That does sum up our season. But thankfully, 37 minutes into the match, Sam Long leaps like a salmon. It's a brilliant header into the back of the net from a corner, and one of our own, Sam Long, who's I think who had a good game. I did think he had a really good game and stepped up with that back line. A fantastic header to make it 1-1. Second half, you can see not anything happened when it comes to goals, hence why the game finished 1-1. But I thought we were on top. I did think we were on top. And if we had a striker or somebody who could score a goal, we'd probably win this game 4 or 5-1. And that sounds silly when you draw a game 1-1. And I know, working with coulds and shoulds is quite a dangerous thing, especially when you're in a relegation battle and you can't score goals. But I do think with a lack of clinical edge, we're going to just keep drawing games, because this game had to be 3 points, not because of the opposition, because they've got better players on paper, let's be honest, and are in a better position. But game state, when you look at game state, we were the better side until we get into the final third, and then we're just simply not good enough. I want to give Elliot Moore some credit as well. Number 5 here for Oxford United. In fact, we can bring them up, I think, a little bit larger. Maybe we can't. I'll just move my face over at the editing stage of this episode. But I want to show you these here, the aerial duels. I thought Colby Bishop was really quiet, and the big reason for that was Elliot Moore. You can see aerial duels. He was really competing quite physically with Colby Bishop. It was clear that Elliot Moore and Bishop, that was going to be the duel. We knew keeping Bishop quiet was going to be a massive help, because, yes, we can't score goals, but they can score goals, and Colby Bishop is a big reason for that goal threat, and Elliot Moore keeping him quiet was massive. He won 8 out of his 9 aerial duels. For context, Bishop only won 4 out of 12. It wasn't all of the time, of course. Bishop was going up against Elliot Moore because Bishop had 12 and Moore had 9 total duels, but a lot of the time they were up against each other, and I thought Moore did very, very well at keeping him quiet. Brannigan showed his quality, as he always does. He's a fantastic player. I think in this season, it hasn't been the best of his campaigns, of course, but playing with a side that aren't doing very well, that is quite difficult. I thought yesterday he dictated the tempo. He stepped up in the game against Pompey like he always does. And I thought he did a really, really good job at just, like I said, controlling the tempo and getting Oxford forward at those key moments. Finally then, let's go to the league table, because it's not a pretty sight, but it still has to be mentioned. Oxford in 20th position, 41 points, of course, with Cambridge losing, Morecambe winning, but Accrington losing, MK Dons and Port Vale losing as well. That isn't the end of the world. Thankfully, most teams above and below us lost the game, so we have made ground, small ground, on that team below us, Cambridge, and on MK Dons above us. And of course, we have got a game in hand on MK Dons next Tuesday against Cheltenham. So there is an opportunity to leapfrog MK Dons, but we've got to win, and MK Dons have got to lose their game on Saturday. I think, to be honest with you, we just got to focus on ourselves at this point in the season. It's about winning the games in front of us. Barnsley away on Saturday is not going to be easy. And of course, then Pompey now 9th in the league. 4 draws on the bounce, 65 points. I think the playoffs are probably a little bit out of reach. 7 points now from that top 6. They've had a difficult season. It's going to be 7 years, I think, in League One. If they don't go up this year, which does look quite unlikely now, I think John Mousinho getting a little bit of stick after the game, but I think time will tell how that will turn out. It finishes Oxford 1, Pompey 1. So up next, Exeter 1, Derby County 2. The XG for the match 0.68 to Derby's 1.25. It might have been a nervy end for Derby, but they got across the line in the end and earned a crucial 3 points. Where would Derby be without David McGoldrick's goals this season? A great brace once again from him last night. Let's go to the graph in front of you here. Both sides had moments, but Derby created better chances in those moments, hence the higher XG of 1.25, and you can see there the spike's fairly similar actually, quite a rare graph where there weren't many low moments in the game, a little bit in that first half and a little bit in the middle of the second half, but generally when a side did come forward, they actually came forward with a little bit of threat. But when I talk about big chances and expected goals within those moments, I think Derby did do better. Again, it wasn't a great game of football for Derby County, but at this point in the season, I bang on about it all the time. It's about winning games, and it's just points on the board at this stage in the season. I think it does show Exeter's low XG that the lack of big chances from those moments was massive. Only one big chance created in the game. We'll come over here to the shot map. Quite evenly matched. I think they were quite similar. You can see Exeter's shot map here and Derby's there. I think Derby much more narrow with the shots, and actually I've got a reason for that, which we'll come on to in just a second, but all of their shots in quite a narrow part of the football pitch, with Exeter a little bit more widespread, more so on the left and the right hand side. The reason I think for Derby's more narrow shots and the attacks in the more narrow areas is going to be explained when looking at these average positions. You can see here very, very tight in that front three, number 10, number 11 and number 17. Of course that's McGoldrick, Buckhuizen and Mendes-Lang. Lewis Sibley, Mendes-Lang and David McGoldrick. These are three players playing as almost a diamond in the attacking third. And that's really important, and that's purposely done by Paul Warne. It's a real lack of width for Derby, but I think it gave them more bodies in those forward areas and around the forward players. I think McGoldrick isn't somebody that as a lone striker will necessarily work because he's not the quickest at the age that he is, but of course he's a fantastic finisher, and give him that support around him and the surface, he's going to provide the goods, hence the 2 goals last night. I thought Mendes-Lang, the pace of him playing off McGoldrick was really clever, because we know Mendes-Lang, he's the more physically, I guess they're quite physical, both of them, but he's more physical and he's quicker than David McGoldrick. He can play off the likes of that number 10, and then you can start, getting in behind and playing with a little bit more freedom. Maybe don't hug the touchline this type of game. Use the fullbacks for that if you like. They had Hayden Roberts, who's predominantly a left back playing at left wing back, or centre back playing at left wing back, and Jason Knight is more of a midfielder playing right wing back. I'll get those positions right eventually, but you can see the more advanced is number 38, because Jason Knight is more of an attacking player compared to the other side. Almost a bit like an elbow tactic Derby County used yesterday. But I think it's really important to say, why are those shots quite narrow? Because they were playing quite a narrow front three. Let's move on to some key players, because there were quite a few key players for Derby. Curtis Davies, I think, had a fantastic game. You can see here 7 clearances across the match, 3 block shots, 4 interceptions. In terms of his duels, he won every duel in the air and only missed 1 out of his 3 ground duels. I thought he did really, really well. I think being part of a solid Derby County defence, I know they conceded, but I think they still had to be switched on. Nothing happened in the first half. In the second half, it did come to life, and I think Curtis Davies across the game did really well at defending and keeping that back line really, really tight. And of course, you can't look much further than David McGoldrick when it comes to key players. 2 goals on the night, and actually when looking at his heat map here, he's dropping a little bit deeper to receive the ball outside the attacking penalty area. 2 key passes on the night as well, but those 2 goals, like I said, right at the start, are the crucial moments for him and his side. And finally, I think Conor Hourihane did a really good job in central midfield. Got the assist, of course, 53 touches, 4 key passes. I think when it comes to a dominant midfield display and being a little bit more creative in there, that's what Conor Hourihane is in that side to do, and he did that yesterday and last night. So I think those 3 players for Derby definitely do deserve credit. For Exeter, it's not an embarrassing defeat whatsoever. Their season probably is over. They're not going to be getting relegated, they're not going to go up. They might be on the beach, some would say, but even still, it's important to be competitive, and they were. They got a goal in the last 10 minutes through Jack Sparks, but at the end of the day, it doesn't mean anything. It's a consolation goal in the end. It made it a little bit nervy for Derby, which again isn't a bad thing for Exeter, putting pressure on the opposition, but I think Derby quite rightly, and they needed to see through and be mentally strong at those final moments when looking at the league table. Still outside the top 6, but now, of course, they are level on points with Bolton, 1 point behind Peterborough, and they have a game in hand on Bolton Wanderers. So it's an important win, not getting them into the playoffs right now, but it's going to get them closer. It's a crucial game to win. On to Saturday will be the mentality for Derby County fans. Let's move on to the next game. It finishes Exeter 1, Derby County 2. So next up, Ipswich 2, Port Vale 1. The XG for the match, 1.58 to Port Vale's 0.23. It's important to mention Port Vale parted ways with their manager Clark at the beginning of the week, making this journey to Portman Road even more difficult than it was going to be in the first place. Let's go straight to the graph now. That is what the top sides do. When they're on top, Ipswich, they go on and make sure they win the game. Port Vale, they did make it difficult, but the character and the high spirits of Ipswich made sure they came away with the result. Let's go straight to the stats as well down here. A complete and utter domination of the ball, 70% possession to 30%. But I thought maybe in front of goal, Ipswich slightly off it today. 2 shots on target from 12 is actually quite unlike Kieran McKenna's side. Normally much better when getting shots off and testing the goalkeeper on more occasions. Perhaps a little bit of burnout or complacency from the weekend. Look, they got the result, and that's the most important thing. I'm not digging out Ipswich, but I'm looking at 2 shots on target and 12 total shots. They could have done a little bit more. For context, of course, Port Vale only had 6 shots, 10 lower in total, but have the same number on target. I think maybe shots on goal being a little bit better in front of goal is what matters. But then saying that, they had 2 shots on target and won the game 2-1. One was a penalty. But even still, I think maybe on another day, that could have been quite a dangerous way of going about your business. But ultimately, thankfully, they did take the chances that came along and they went on and won the game. Not quite the suffocation football that we've seen in recent weeks, where you basically took an opposition by their throat and then just go at them and wave attack after attack. It wasn't that type of game. Look, they were on top, and in a way they were going at Port Vale and dominating the game, but in terms of shots and end product at the end of those waves, wasn't quite there yesterday. But like I said, it doesn't matter. They win the game 2-1. At this point in the season, I'm going to repeat myself, it's about winning matches, especially when you've got Plymouth and Sheffield Wednesday that we'll come on to later, winning games of football elsewhere. Will they care? No. And they battled and they got the job done. And I think Kieran McKenna said in his post-match interview, that's almost as satisfying as a 6-0 win over Charlton, because maybe it wasn't a high scoring and it wasn't 6-0 and it wasn't a complete and utter domination when it comes to goals, but it was a mental and, like I said, high-spirited battle of a hard-fought result, and that's what you need to do in types of games like that. When you're not at your best and you still win, that's just as pleasing, because it means you're not just the side when you're scoring goals and when you've got a plan A it works, but when things maybe don't go quite the way you would have wanted it, when things and challenges are put in your way, you can't quite get through it. That's the problem. But that was not an issue for for Ipswich last night against Port Vale. They saw through it and won the game 2-1. Let's go to the average positions here then. Let's move on to these positions, and we'll start off with Port Vale. I think the game plan was pretty obvious, quite compact, quite cramp in that midfield, playing quite a low block. You can see the most attacking player is number 19 for Port Vale, Macy. They made sure that he was the most attacking player and the most forward player. He's the quickest, and I think in terms of a potential break that Port Vale could do, he was that man playing as that more advanced role in that, like I said, really quite cramp and compact system. Lots of players there behind the halfway line, really playing that low block, making it difficult for Ipswich to break them down. Did they struggle? I mean, arguably, with only 2 shots on target for Ipswich, you'd say they probably did struggle, and for large parts, this actually did work. When you look at Ipswich, it's what you expect. Very, very high line. Look how high those defenders are, number 6 and number 15. Almost averaging positions on the halfway line. Attackers struggled to play in behind. You can see normally Burns is sort of out here, and Leif Davis, who's their left back, is once again the most advanced player on the pitch. We talk about him against Charlton being the most advanced out of any other Charlton player. Once again, I think he is the most advanced player out of any other footballer on the pitch, but he's very, very high up. But you can see it's not as spread out. They're almost as a straight line, those attackers for Ipswich, because they can't sort of be their outlet, because the tightness of Port Vale and that low block is proving it so hard to break down. But either way, to still win that type of game says so much about Ipswich and so much about the quality and the clinical edge when it matters, and stepping up at those moments. Let's go to the league table here. Then you can see Plymouth, I mentioned it earlier, winning their game, and Sheffield Wednesday also coming away with 3 points. So they had to make sure they sort of came through this and won it. 42 games played. They have got a game in hand on Sheffield Wednesday. 1 point behind Plymouth, of course. This still does see them chasing Plymouth, but I still think this is one of those where it's just as satisfying, because when Port Vale went there with, look, they haven't got a manager. You can't really blame for Port Vale. Was it the most attractive style? No. A 0.23 XG isn't very attractive. But against for Port Vale against Ipswich, is that the game plan that could work? I mean, yes, sides have done that this season and got something out of the game against Ipswich. And Port Vale, they went there at Portman Road without a manager, lots of struggles, and they still came away with at 1 point, so some real positives. And I say, when reflecting on the entire game, there were positives in there, but ultimately the result wasn't. They lose the game 2-1. Let's move on to the next match. So the final game before we go around the grounds, Bristol Rovers 1, Sheffield Wednesday 2. The XG for the match, 0.34 to Wednesday's 0.9. Not an outstanding Sheffield Wednesday display, but one that ends in a win. And at this stage in the season, that's all that matters, right? Let's just say it was a battle. You can see by looking at the graph in front of you here, goals came from tiny spells in the match Wednesday. Those 2 tiny spikes on the graph there is where the goals came from in that first 45, and then moving into the second half, you can see Rovers scored from a tiny spike in the 46th minute. It wasn't a fantastic match, but one where Wednesday leave and go, look, the two sides we're competing with for the top 2 places have won as well. Let's just get out of town, get out of Bristol with the 3 points. Did we thoroughly deserve it? Were we on top the majority of the game? Absolutely not. In fact, we can look at the game plan that Darren Moore adopted here. Possession is a massive, massive indicator into that style. 66% possession for Joey Barton's side, 34% for Moore's side. They made that decision to soak up the pressure, concede possession and soak up the pressure, and rely on taking the minimal chances that came to them. And you can see that again. You can look at the graph, tiny spikes, but less possession. It doesn't always work. It does not always work. And if you lose this game, more, I mean, I saw it was getting some pelters anyway, and I don't think you should be doing it after a win. It's not helpful, but if this hadn't have worked and you had lost this game, or not even won the game and drawn it, in fact, you can see the frustration. It's not a nice style of play. It's not the most attractive, conceding 34%. With the quality of players that they've got, the likes of Barry Bannon, I know they've got injuries, and Byers is a big miss, and Windass is also someone that, you know, really would bring us an energy and a spark, and, you know, he was on great form before he got injured. But I still think Wednesday, they should be playing better football with this squad of players. And look, I'm not going at them, and this is a contradiction, because I said right at the start, this is about winning games. At this stage, at the business end of the campaign, this performance doesn't really matter. I think it is slightly concerning, and I wouldn't say it's a promotion performance, a promotion winning performance for sure, but they won a match. They won a game of football. They got the 3 points, and we'll come onto the league table in just a second when you've got Plymouth and Ipswich also winning above you. You know, both of those teams got games in hand on Wednesday as well. You can't afford to drop points in this game. So if that's the way you've got to beat an opposition, soak up pressure, have three shots on target and win a game 2-1, absolutely fine. Teams have done that. Teams have been successful in doing that. But I know if it doesn't work, it looks like a bad showing. Let's just say if that was 1-0 to Rovers and they hadn't scored those 2 goals. I know it's if, buts and maybes, and it's definitely hypothetical, and I'm sort of painting a bad picture on Wednesday without it happening. But what I'm trying to say is take the 2 goals away, quite a big thing to take away, and then look at those stats. They easily could have lost that match, but thankfully they did take those chances, and that's a big, important factor in the game plan that he adopted, Darren Moore. Winning at this stage in the season is the most important thing, but I think you're going to need more quality in the playoffs. I think that's fair to say. When you get into that playoff campaign with, you know, Bolton, let's say it's going to be if they come third, or Barnsley or Peterborough, maybe they go automatically up. But if it is through the playoffs, you're going to need more quality than that, because sides will just, they're going to take the game to Wednesday, like Wednesday didn't do to Rovers, and that could be quite dangerous. Look, they've got the quality, and they've got the ability. They've shown it on that 24-game unbeaten run. They were just destroying sides, but their confidence maybe is lacking now, and potentially they're sort of trying to go about it in a different way and grind out results and hobble over the line. I guess if it works, then you absolutely can't critique it. It's a game plan, and it worked, and it was executed to perfection, but I just have some concern about it. Maybe going forward, not on last night because it worked. Let's have a little look at the league table here. Third in the league, 87 points. Of course, like I said, they've got games in hand. Unfortunately, teams have got games in hand above them. Ipswich and Plymouth, that being. And of course, there is a bit of a gap now. 2 points from top. Sparta point from Ipswich, who are in second place. As for Bristol Rovers, a good run actually, with 2 wins and a draw coming to an end with a defeat last night. They're going to be safe. They're going to be 15th, and they probably are on the beach. But they didn't make it easy for Wednesday, even though, let's just say, it didn't massively matter the final outcome of this game. It finishes Bristol Rovers 1, Sheffield Wednesday 2. So the first game, as we go around the grounds, Shrewsbury 1, Plymouth 2, a dominant Plymouth display. You can see when looking at the graph there, they were all over Shrewsbury during the match, and right at the end, in the last second, the best team score late. They go on and win it 2-1. A fantastically important 3 points for Plymouth. If you draw that match, it just doesn't quite work with Wednesday and Ipswich winning, but when you score late on, that's fantastic. And like I said, it was a cliche in football and still is. The best sides make sure that they score late on, and they did. They won it 2-1. Fair play, well done to Stephen Schumacher's side. They remain in the driving seat. Let's go to Lincoln versus Barnsley, 0-0. I think we quickly move on from that one. Barnsley and Lincoln having moments. You'd say more blue than green when looking at the graph there. Not a bad 0-0 to be honest with you, but just of course lacked a goal. Barnsley sort of still chasing the top 2. I think probably now with the other 3 teams winning, that is over now. I think they needed to win that game if they were wanted to sort of stay in the mix with those 3 sides above them that won yesterday. Accrington 1, Peterborough 2. A good result for Peterborough in that playoff place. Now with a little bit more comfort, not complete comfort, but they are in 5th. So when looking at the standings, it's more comfortable. Points-wise, not as much, but a win is important. Accrington not looking good, is it? That form does not get better. Burton 1, Bolton 1. Bolton again, they're making it hard, aren't they? They're stumbling over that line, and with Derby having games in hand on them, or a game in hand on them, a draw against Burton is not a good result. They need to score more than 1 goal. Interestingly, this is what what Bolton did against Oxford. They sort of got a goal, and then sort of thought, we'll just try and protect what we've got and not go for the second one. I think Bolton's best form of defence is attack, because in the game against Oxford, they only won that game because they scored a goal, and then they invited all the pressure in Oxford because they didn't score. Bolton won the game, and based on that, they deserved it. But if we had a striker, we would have got more than nothing out of that match, and Burton were a prime example of that. They got a goal, and they stole a point from Bolton. And you say they didn't really steal it. I know Bolton tried to get that second goal in that moment, but again, you've got to make sure you take those chances and make sure you do score when you are on top, because if you don't and you only score 1 goal, you're doing the same thing. Oxford and Cambridge, similar stories. Let's go to the final games, and I believe we've got just 3 more. Bristol Rovers, Forest Green Rovers, 0, Fleetwood 0. Yeah, let's just move on from that one. A long trip for Nappers, and he sees no goals at Forest Green, and not a great game either. Sorry for you. That's really not a good game of football. I didn't quite realise how bad that was. Cambridge 1, Wickham 2. Good result for Oxford and those relegation sides. Cambridge losing and that really good run coming to an end. But for Wickham, it's important as well because they are still sort of in contention, falling away a little bit because of that quite poor form since Bloomfield has come through the door. But even still, it's a result and one that matters, and a better Wickham showing. I think when they did come forward, a bit more of the Wickham of old, and especially the Wickham of under Gareth Ainsworth. And then finally, MK Dons 0, Charlton 1. I'd said I'd shout out Ryan Faulkner, my good friend Ryan. He was there. I think that's now his 2nd win this season away from home. I think he went 10 games without a win on the road, supporting his side Charlton. So for him to go and see and win at MK Dons, which is never an easy place to go, because MK Dons, they've got talent in that squad, and it didn't quite make it completely easy for their side against MK Dons last night. But even still, they got the result, and that's what matters. And when looking at the league table now, you can see it there. Forest Green Rovers, of course, relegated during last night. Accrington, Morecambe and Cambridge, the three teams also in that bottom 4. And then you can see the top 6 now. Bolton, Peterborough, Barnsley, Sheffield Wednesday, Ipswich and Plymouth. So no changes in that bottom 4 or in that top 6 after last night's games. But, of course, the most important thing is those points, and it is getting a little bit tighter down the bottom end and a little bit tighter at the top end. And that does round up the roundup on this Wednesday morning. If you did enjoy the content, please make sure you leave a like and subscribe. On the road to 5,000 subscribers, we're so close. The recent support on the episodes have been incredible, and that's down to you just showing your support, and that's all I can ask for. Thank you so much. Leave your thoughts in the comment section down below, and I will see you all very soon. Take care.